I had 30 wonderful years in the advertising industry, and I have to say, I enjoyed getting out of bed and I couldn't wait to get to the office every day. And one of the things that I noticed when I was probably in my late 20s was that the people in the advertising business, and I suspect it's pretty much the same in a lot of different businesses, the people who seem to make the most money and have the most fun were the people who were the rainmakers, the people who could bring the business in. So you had a group of people out there who were very good at, once the clients had been caught, you put them in and somebody kept them. But then there were the people who were out there catching the clients, and it seemed to me that they were the ones making the most money at the end of the day, and also they were the ones having the most fun. One of the things that I noticed very early on in life was that sometimes you would put forward an idea or a proposition or even a price which you thought was superior, but you didn't win. And what I realised was that most companies get the brief from a client, whether it's in the advertising business or it's for a telecommunications tender or for an audit or whatever it might be, and they think that the brief is gold. In other words, if I answer that brief as though it's an exam question and I get 100%, then I'll win. And what I realised after a while was that they're not always the people who win. What we found was it's the people who understand all of the dynamics of the pitching process. You've got to be able to do that first part. No doubt you have to be able to answer the brief, but that's 101. That's just the price of a ticket to the game. But what you have to have is you have to understand all of the dynamics of the pitching process if you want to win. Sitting around the room are half a dozen men or women, all of them with their own individual ambitions, with their own fears, with their own foibles, with their own strange little hot buttons. And so it's not until you understand what's going on in those people's heads and what it is you need to convince them of, not as a group, but individually, are you able to tailor your solution to meet their own individual needs. And if you go one little bit higher than that, I always think that you start with what are the strategic imperatives of the company. Don't just sort of stay down in the little bit of the business that you've been asked to focus on, the telecommunications needs of this company, the insurance needs of this company. Go up and helicopter up into what's keeping the chief executive awake at night. Go and read their annual reports, read all of the press clippings, look at their speeches, find out what's happening with their competition, what technology is coming down the pipe, what regulatory changes might be coming, what are the things that are going to affect this company. When I retired from the advertising business after 30 years, and I'd say I loved every minute of it, and I thought, well, there's a lot of intellectual property that we've garnered here. And it doesn't just apply to the advertising industry. These principles apply to every business, big or small. And so I started working with organisations and helping them to put their pitches together. And what I realised was that they were all coming at it from the same angle that most of the advertising competitors were. And what I realised was that if they if they had put as much time into their pitch in the first place as they put into all of the extremely creative excuses as to why they lost, then they might have won in the first place. You see, everybody wants to bitch about why we lost, and it was never my fault. It was always, oh, we got beaten on price. We never do it for that price. We never stoop that low. Those competitors of ours will never make money out of it. They'll fall over. Or, oh, we were never in it with a show in the first place. It turns out that the managing director of their organisation is an old golfing buddy. Or there are some non-executive directors on that board who had an influence which had nothing to do with the answer. It was based on old relationships. All sorts of highly creative, maybe even to the untrained eye, plausible excuses. But the only reason that you lost is because you weren't good enough. And that doesn't mean you didn't have a good enough product or price or value proposition. You weren't good enough at pitching. Thus the expression, stop bitching and start pitching. One of the greatest traps that people fall into is they don't set a timeline. They don't give themselves time to win. Generally, they get the brief, they sniff the opportunity, and then they press buttons and the wheels of industry begin. Things get ordered, research, analysts, everything, people start running in all directions. But there's no single direction. And what happens is they try to solve the puzzle over, if you've got 6 weeks to come up with an answer, they spend 5.5 weeks looking for the solution. And then once they've found it, they've only got about a half a week to polish the solution. I've always believed that a 70% right answer found 5 weeks before the presentation and had 5 weeks of polishing will always win over an 80% right answer that you only found a couple of days before the pitch and you didn't rehearse it, you didn't polish it, you weren't professional in the way you pitched it. So step one, get a timeline in place and stay with it.